Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Professor Michael Scott. It's a great pleasure to be with you for this half hour where we can spend a little time answering your questions regarding my latest TV series that's been going out on BBC Two, Ancient Invisible Cities. So we have been going to three great cities. We've been going to Cairo, we've been going to Athens, and we've been going to Istanbul. Now, these are three cities that I visited a number of times over the years for work, for my work as an academic, as a practicing ancient historian and archaeologist. Hi Judith, how are you doing? Great that you could join. Good afternoon, how are you doing? From Milton Keynes again, great to see Milton Keynes is back in there in the mix. Not quite Cairo, not quite Athens, not quite Istanbul, but a city that truly stands on its own 2 feet and is a brilliant example, of course, of Hippodamanian ancient 4th century BC town planning, that laying out in grids. Hello, Philip, how are you doing? So Milton Keynes has its own claim to the ancient world. But Cairo, Athens and Istanbul, these were three cities that I've visited many times before. And this time we were going with the Invisible Cities programme, most importantly, to try and uncover some of the lesser known, less accessible parts of the city. Hi Latifah, hi Zia, how are you doing? Great, okay, you've got a week off, fantastic, welcome. I hope you can enjoy the next 30 minutes. These three cities, and what we wanted to do was surprise ourselves as much as you guys with the locations that we were visiting. And I'm really pleased to be able to say I really feel like we've been able to do that. Hi Charlotte, how are you doing? Each of these places where I was seeing things that I've never seen before, and sometimes that's because we were able to gain access to locations through the difficult world of permissions, which is a real problem when making TV. Can you simply get permission from the relevant authorities to be able to visit some of these locations? And in other occasions, you couldn't get to these sites unless you had a massive safety team with you to be able to ensure your health and safety. So locations which would not be accessible to me as an academic visiting for research purposes, but because of the wonder of the nature of this program, we're able to not only spend the time getting access, but then bring the necessary people in to help ensure safe access. So we've been having some great questions. Welcome if you've just joined us. This is a live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. It's been a great pleasure to be with you on your screens in the UK over the last couple of weeks with Ancient Invisible Cities. And remember, if you're enjoying these live Q&As, I also do these every week. Today we're doing it on a Friday as a special live Q&A in advance of the final programme of Ancient Invisible Cities, where we go to Istanbul tonight on BBC Two at 9 p.m. But normally our Q&As are on Thursdays at 4 p.m. at the same time. So hopefully if you're enjoying this one, you can sign up for live notifications through the Facebook page, facebook.com/Michael Scott Academic, and you can be part of these conversations going forward. And how they work is each week people send in their questions in advance to the Facebook page, and then I get a chance to answer at least some of them, as well as we talk about what's on about the ancient world around the world right now, be it exhibitions or particular sites that are worth visiting. And we also talk about classics in the news, how kind of ancient world examples constantly seem to be being brought up and engaged in the modern world. So hopefully you can join me for those in the weeks that follow. But today we're focusing almost exclusively on ancient invisible cities. So we've got our first question here, which is from Andy Robson. The 3D scans are mesmerising. I'm so glad you're enjoying them, Andy. But what do you see as their purpose? How will they impact upon future learning and research? This is a really great question. One of the things I've been saying in past weeks and over the live tweeting during the programmes is that every time we come back to do a new series of invisible cities, we started with Rome in 2014. Hi Jenny, how are you doing? Great, great that you can join from London. We started in 2014 with Rome, we did Naples, Venice and Florence in 2016-17, and now Cairo, Athens and Istanbul. And every time we come back, the technology has moved on to make something new possible that wasn't possible last time. And I think really here, this time round, the big leap forward has been in what you can do with the virtual reality scenes that you create from the 3D laser scans, and how manipulable they are, and how much you can interweave those with normal filmed camera work. And what I've noticed over those those three series is that the scans have moved from just being used to exemplify the location of a particular site that we're visiting and perhaps putting that in relation above and below ground. So in Rome 2014, Rome's Invisible City, we looked at an underground quarry and we mapped where it existed above and below ground, and that helped sort of tie in and help explain why there were some subsidence going on in certain people's back gardens on the Aventine Hill in Rome because of the quarry there. So you could do that. When we came to Italy's Invisible Cities, we were able to start scanning in a much more mobile manner. So the actual equipment we were using had changed, so it wasn't just a fixed laser scanner, and there was a guy with a scanning backpack that had 2 laser scanners and 5 flash cameras going simultaneously, along with a power supply and a massive hard drive, and he was able to just walk along through sites and actually create the scans of them. And then this time around, as I said, the step forward has been in the virtual reality turn, and as a result of that, you've seen the scans and the programs move from just being used to exemplify the location of a place to actually becoming part of the narrative framework of the film itself. So when we move from one location to another, that can be really clearly made apparent by moving into the scan world and then throwing yourself through the scan and moving to the next location and then morphing straight back into real life camera footage. And equally within the scan world, one can put oneself in any viewing position, which is not possible often in real life because you can't get a camera in certain locations. There might be a wall there, or there's a big hole there, or there's a barrier there. So actually the scans are becoming useful for when you want a particular angle on something that's actually just not possible to create in reality. Hi Julie, how are you doing? Great that you could join us. So the scans have started to become a native part, if you like, of the language of the film, as much as they're exemplary and helping explain the specific locations that we go to. Hi Debbie, I'm so glad you're enjoying the programs. Thank you very much for joining this live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott, dedicated entirely to the series that's currently on BBC Two, Ancient Invisible Cities. And our final episode, of course, is tonight. We go to Istanbul, 9 p.m. on BBC Two, so I hope that you can join in for that. And if you can't watch it live tonight, do not worry, it's going to be on iPlayer. The entire series is going to be on BBC iPlayer for the next 6 months. They've extended its run on BBC iPlayer because you guys have been so keen on the series, and also it is also available on Amazon Prime to download, Amazon Video to download and watch direct, and also from the 1st of October there will be a DVD of the series that you can buy as well, which is, I think it's a Region 2 DVD, so you might have to check, depending on where you are in the world, whether that is going to be any use to you. So Andy, thank you very much for that question. That's absolutely fantastic. Go to one from William, age 7, who's been enjoying the programs and enjoying the scans as well. And he's asking particularly about the Cairo program, and he's asking about Djoser's pyramid. Hi, how are you doing from Calcutta? Fantastic. I'm so glad that you could join us. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. What's the most astonishing place you visited in Egypt? A question coming in from Diego. Thank you very much. Jason, hi. I'm so glad you enjoyed the Athens program. We were just talking about Cairo, and we're talking about the Cairo program, and we had a question from William, age 7, who was asking about Djoser's pyramid at Saqqara. And I think this was actually one of the biggest reveals for me, because when you think about Egypt, you think about the Giza pyramids, the pyramids particularly of Khufu and Khafre. But actually Giza is a sort of, if you like, an anomaly. It's a place where the pharaohs of the 4th and 5th dynasties go to have their tombs, their pyramids erected, but actually they're breaking with tradition in doing so, in that the traditional burial ground for pharaohs was actually at Saqqara, and after those dynasties, the pharaohs will return to Saqqara, and it will continue to be a burial site for the next it's the longest continually used burial site in the world, I think, for 3,000 years. Hi Julie from Thasos, fantastic, full of archaeological wonders, absolutely. Kind of what a place to go, definitely worth visiting. Most of the excavations on Thasos, if I'm right, are undertaken by the French Archaeological School in Athens, so it's definitely worth kind of checking in with the EFA, www.efa.gr, for the latest that's going on in Thasos. Thank you for the question. But Saqqara. So Saqqara was not a site that I spent a lot of time in, but I would definitely want to go back and discover more, and they are discovering more on a daily basis. Just this summer, they actually discovered an entirely new mummification workshop in Saqqara that's giving new insights into the process of mummification. But the question from William was about the stepped pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara. So the very first pyramid before we get to the ones at Giza, the moment where people went from building what were known as mastaba tombs, so very square, rectangular, single level, almost sort of bungalow-esque tombs, into much higher, the concept of the pyramid, the stepped structure that goes up into the air. And lots of people argue over what motivated this step change, quite literally. Was it an attempt to a pathway, a stairway to heaven, as was thought about in the ancient Egyptian mythology and understanding of the gods? Was it simply an attempt to have a monument that was visible from a long distance away in the landscape? So Djoser could have a permanent marker on the landscape. I think that might well have something to do with it. But why stepped? And it seems to be because originally Djoser and his architect did have in mind to build a normal mastaba rectangular tomb. And then actually when you look very carefully at the architecture, and the scans help reveal this, you can see at some point they go, hang on a sec, we could do something different here. And they extend the original architectural plan and put a smaller mastaba rectangular sort of box shaped tomb on top of the first one, and then a smaller one on top of that, and a smaller one on top of that, thus creating this sort of stepped pyramid effect, which is just really a series of mastabas on top of mastabas. But when you go inside the pyramid, as we did in the film, you actually realise that then the real business area where the pharaoh is being buried is actually deep down in the ground, in the bedrock that they've also excavated. Hi, Alexandra from the Pantheon. Great that you can join us, kind of coming from the Pantheon. I hope you've got a nice espresso coffee kind of with you by your side while you're watching this. Thank you for tuning in with this live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. We're talking about the series Ancient Invisible Cities that I've written and presented, which is currently on BBC Two. And we're here tonight talking in advance of the final episode where we'll be heading to Istanbul. So we were just talking about the Cairo program and the Djoser pyramid at Saqqara, the very first pyramid, its stepped nature. And of course they do move. Khafre and Khufu's pyramids at Giza were actually very smooth-sided because they have covered them in a limestone coating to make them absolutely smooth and shimmer in the sunlight. And there's still a tiny bit of that coating surviving on the top of Khafre's pyramid today. But underneath, of course, it was still constructed in that sort of slightly block structure, stepped structure. So the stepped structure is an inevitable part of the style of building, but they then, in later pyramids, decide to coat it and cover it with a smooth sheen of limestone. So William, thank you very, very much for that question. Age 7, William there. I'm so glad you're enjoying the series. I hope you continue to do so. We've had some questions from Debbie Porter. When filming in Athens in the underground caves and waterways, we were in some pretty tight spaces. Yes, indeed we were. Did you feel claustrophobic or worried about being confined in such spaces? Thanks, Sue. Amazing photos of the Acropolis. Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you very much indeed for saying. We did film in some very, very tight spaces, and I have to admit to you all that I do actually have slight claustrophobia. So some of these locations, particularly in the Athens film, were absolutely pushing me to the edge of what I could do. And I think the one that really will always stick in my mind is where we had to abseil down a tunnel 16 meters down underground to get ourselves into the Hadrianic era aqueduct, which when we were down there was so narrow that I got my head stuck. If you saw in the film, I was wearing a hard hat for health and safety, and at one point I tried to turn my head from side to side and got the hat stuck. The side of the walls were so narrow. Now, I mean, I think it's really worth it talking about. One of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit behind the scenes here with the making of Invisible Cities. Hi, Sarah. So glad you're enjoying the series. Oh, bless you. Talk a little bit about how we managed to do these things, because while on camera it's just me or a cameraman down there, or perhaps me and a contributor, actually there's an entire team involved in making this work. So when we got to the location of the underground aqueduct, I have heard, Diego, I have heard about the Brazilian natural history fire, absolutely terrible with the loss of so many objects. And I know that there's a campaign running on Twitter for anyone who's visited that museum to post their photos of the things that the photos that they took while they're in the museum, post those online so that at least a photographic record of all the wonderful things that have sadly now been destroyed can be preserved forever. So anyone who's got photos from visiting the museum in Rio in Brazil that was destroyed by fire, please do look for that campaign online and contribute to your to the collection. Great question from Natalie as well, just come in online. In Venice, were you surprised by any of your findings? Absolutely, and I'll come back to Venice in a little while. We're just talking here about ancient invisible cities, Athens, and how we actually go about getting into some of these crazy locations, like the 16-meter underground aqueduct. So what we do is this: we will first off hear about a location, or I'll know about it, or we'll be talking about it with the Athens-based fixer team that we work with. We'll then have to be talking about whether it is possible and safe in any regard to access it. So we'll be talking to the local Greek archaeological services. We'll be talking to those people who are responsible for the ancient site, and we'll be seeing what is needed to be able to make it a safe venture to be able to film in it. If it looks like it's going to be successful, that we will get permission to be able to go and film there. Then we move into the practicality and planning stage. Now, a location like Athens and the underground aqueduct, we are only going to attempt if we have a safety crew with us. So a couple of occasions, both for Athens and for Cairo, we brought out safety experts, Tim Fogg, who we were working with, who you will see in the Athens film, who I'm talking to at different locations. He comes out with all his equipment and kit, and then we also have a local support team who are expert cavers, expert underground explorers, who come to support that. He will go to the location at least a couple of days in advance of us filming there, and also the location being scanned, and he will go down and explore it himself to make sure, see what he thinks are the danger points, see what he's happy with, what he's not happy with. He then does a briefing session for us as to what to expect, what not to expect, what's possible, what's not, how he's going to run the day. And on the day when we're filming there, it really is Tim, the lead safety expert, who's in charge of how the day runs. And then we might have a training session. So for the aqueduct, because we were going to have to abseil down the tube but then free climb up the rope out, rather than being able to walk up a ladder or be pulled out, or without wanting to sort of engage with and muck around with the sides of the tunnel, because the sides were bare earth effectively and quite loose, and we didn't want to send a lot of material running down into the underground aqueduct. We were having to free climb up the rope. We had to do a training session for that. Any plans to go back, Andrea, to the underground aqueduct? Well, actually, I you know what? I'm actually quite addicted to it now, these kind of spaces, and really would like to explore more. It goes on for something like 20 kilometers. So you could actually walk and walk and walk underground all the way to where it ends, which is the Hadrianic underground reservoir that was in use in Athens until the 1950s, which is under Dexameni Square in Kolonaki in Athens, where above the square, it's a beautiful square where you can sit in a cafe and have a great coffee, but it's also an open-air cinema during the summer. So we could, if we'd had chance to explore more of the aqueduct, walked all the way into central Athens and popped up in the centre of Athens. So it'd be great fun. Once we're done, so we do our training session, and this involved actually having some ropes attached up a tree and us having to hoik ourselves up into the air. I wish I had a photo to be able to share with you. And then we start the process of going down, and we go down one at a time. When we were down in the underground aqueduct, the tunnel was so narrow, it's actually impossible for people to pass one another. So we actually had to decide the order that we were going to go down in had to then be the order that we stayed in down underground. The camera equipment we could take down couldn't possibly take our big cameras down, so we actually had to film the whole thing on GoPro cameras, tiny little cameras. So the camera was down there with the GoPros, but then we couldn't have any additional equipment with us down there because obviously it's still running water, it's a running aqueduct, and the water bags the secure sort of safe water impermeable bags don't really work, because if you're putting your hands in and out of them to grab stuff, your hands are wet because you're in the water, out of the water all the time. So that doesn't work. So anything we need has to be hoisted down the tunnel, each individual time by the crew that are remaining up above to help us. And that was all complicated by the fact that we had radios to be able to communicate with the team up above, but we're 16 meters underground, and the radios only worked when we're directly below the access shaft entrance. So there was an awful lot of key communication that needed to sort of work backwards and forwards between the different team members to be able to get this scene in the can, and a huge amount that goes on behind the scenes, and thanks to a huge amount of people without whom it would just not be possible to make this series. A question from Catherine: what surprised you the most when filming it? I think what I really like about the Invisible Cities series is that we are often in these places that are out of the way underground. So there might be drains, there might be aqueducts, there might be quarries, there might be tunnels. We're in out of the way places. So in the Athens film, when we went to the actual quarry where the marble that made the Parthenon came from, when you do that kind of thing, you're moving away from just oohing and ahhing at the great structures that are created by these great civilizations, and often by their rulers and leaders, or by the state as a whole. And you're moving to locations that were constructed and worked on often by the lowest of the low of society. So in the case of the silver mines in Athens, it was the slaves, or in the aqueduct, it was the kind of the workmen kind of tunneling away underground, or the quarries, it was the skilled stonemasons who were working away, chipping away at the marble, working out the blocks that would work, and then transporting them all the way to the city centre. You are seeing the places in which the everyday citizens and residents and workforce of these great ancient civilizations, where they lived, where they worked, where they thought, where they toiled, where they sweated, where they had to come up with ingenious solutions to problems as those problems kind of hit them in the face. It is a series, as a result, I think, that gets you closer to the sense of the everyday of these ancient worlds, and to the often long processes and long, hard efforts that had to be put into place and had to be undertaken to achieve the finished products that we all know and enjoy. So I think what's always surprising me about these series and the places we go to as a result is just how close you feel to those people who lived often thousands of years ago. And in Cairo, I felt that when we were in the tomb of one of the pyramid builders, of Peteti, who was one of the sort of workforce station chiefs of building the Great Pyramids. And there we were in his tomb, and actually seeing portraits of he and his wife set up side by side near where their bodies would have been laid. Or when we were in Athens in that underground aqueduct, and we saw a little kink between two sections where actually they'd been building two sections to meet and it hadn't quite worked, so they had to sort of make a kink, put in a kink to get it to come together. I think it's those moments that I really love, and which I find the most surprising and the most kind of endearing in that sense as well. Question coming from Linda Jane about the PBS and BBC series that are being made of this. Yes, so the way this series is being made is a co-production between PBS in America and BBC here in the UK, and we are making two versions of it. One for PBS in America with an American presenter, with Darius, and then the BBC and BBC Worldwide version with me. So those two they are filmed simultaneously, so we're both on location together. You probably saw some photos on Twitter at the time of us both in location. We're often both there at the same time because it's a question of permissions and getting everyone there, and we do the scenes. I do the scene often, and then Darius steps in and does the American version. So we are filming at the same time. They have the same directors, and then they are edited in parallel. But to some extent, they are different films, because although we're at the same locations, Darius and I are reacting and thinking about things in different ways, and sort of expressing the experience, finding the actual experience of being in these places differently as well. So hopefully you get a chance at some point to see both series, and you can have some fun comparing. Alexandra, thank you very much indeed for joining. You spotted the Italian edition of Delphi at the Tradens Market bookshop this morning, my book Delphi. I'm so glad. Thank you so much for letting me know. I'm glad that it's there. There is also an Italian version of my more recent book, Ancient Worlds, Antichi Mundi, which is out in Italy as well. It's also out there in Spain, in Korea. There's a Korean translation. There's a Chinese translation coming, and German as well. So there's out in Germany as well. So you can find your translation or your langue préférée somewhere amongst those lot, I hope. This is me, this is Michael Scott, Professor Michael Scott. This is a live Q&A with me, and we're talking about Ancient Invisible Cities, the series that's on BBC Two at the moment, with the final episode coming tonight, 9 p.m. Istanbul. If you want to know more about the making of the series, do visit my blog. It's www.michaelscottweb.com/blog, and on the website you can find lots more about what I do, and obviously also join the Facebook page, www.facebook.com/Michael Scott Academic, and it'd be great to see you back for our weekly live Q&As that we do normally on a Thursday at 4 p.m. You can sign up for live notifications through the Facebook website, and it would be great to see you. Do send your questions in advance, and I'll try to answer as many of them as I can. We go to at least one more question. We've got time for one more question. We had a question. I put a question out about what's your favourite place in Istanbul before the series coming up today, and we've had some great answers. So we've had the Cisterns, we've had Topkapi Palace. Great, often the Bosphorus, just being on the Bosphorus itself and sailing up the Bosphorus, which is absolutely fantastic. Of course, the column from Delphi, which is sitting in the Hippodrome, one of my absolute favourite things. This is the ancient horse racing track of Istanbul that was constructed by the Roman Emperor Constantine, who set up the capital of Constantinople as his new Roman capital and built the Hippodrome and took some of the best things from different parts of the empire, obelisks from Egypt and the serpent column from Delphi in Greece that had stood there since 479 BC, which was the Greek monument to victory against the Persians at the end of the Persian Wars at the Battle of Plataea, and moved it to sit in the Hippodrome. And it still stands there today, what's left of it. The bronze, originally a bronze 9-metre column, 3 entwined serpents with 3 golden serpent heads, and a golden tripod on the top of it. Not that much of the tripod left anywhere to be seen. We've had Hagia Sophia, of course, an absolutely fantastic monument, Blue Mosque, and Galata Bridge as well. And you'll see us in the film tonight going to Galata Bridge and eating some of the balak ekmek, the fried fish sandwiches, which are the thing to eat down near Galata Bridge. And if you haven't been to Istanbul yet, next time you go to obviously to have a fried fish sandwich and sit by the river, by the Bosphorus rather, and just watch the world go by. One of the things, my favourite place in Istanbul that you won't see in the film tonight, but which I always try and pop in on, is the train station. There are train stations on the Asian side and on the European side. And on the European side, obviously, it was the train station where the Orient Express used to come in. If you go into the train station today, you find there is still one of the old waiting rooms there from the grand era of train travel, which is done out beautifully with beautiful wood casing all the way around, and you can get that sort of feel of the excitement of the people who were coming to Istanbul in centuries past when they really were travelling to the ends of the world. So thank you so much for joining us today. We've only got a couple of minutes left, and I know I haven't got to half of your questions. I'm so sorry, but we'll keep them on the list, and then we'll answer some of those next week. So next week, Thursday, which is the 27th of September, we'll be doing. Am I right in speaking that? Yeah, the 27th of September at 4 p.m. next Thursday, we'll be doing live Q&A, and there'll be an event notice on the Facebook page for you to be able to sign up for as well. So do tune back in then, and hopefully we can answer some more questions. One question was that came in was there any scenes that you had to cut from the making of the film that didn't make it into the programs? And yes, there always are. One always does more scenes than needed, because it's one of the most fascinating things about filmmaking, that sometimes you can be in a scene and think it's gone absolutely brilliantly, it's a cracking scene, and then when you watch it actually on screen, something of that just hasn't come across through the camera lens. Who knows why? And sometimes a scene where you watch it, when you did it, you think, I'm not sure if that's worked quite so well. When you watch it on screen, it just comes alive. And so you can never really tell when you're there filming whether a scene is going to really work or not. And so one often films more than one needs. And to make a 1-hour documentary, you will often end up with something like 20 hours of footage that then get edited down through the sort of 5-6 week edit process after coming back from filming. And so there are always scenes that end up on the cutting room floor. One of the saddest, I think, from my perspective, was because one I enjoyed so much was in Cairo, and we went to the Cairo markets, and we had a great rummage around in the back streets of the Cairo markets, and we had an amazing scene working with some people who run a shop there, kind of all the different spices and grains and teas that you can get there, and they loved having us, and we loved having them, and we ended up all kind of having an amazing laugh and drinking tea together, as well as making a great scene for the film when we were talking about Cairo being at the centre of so many trading links here, there and everywhere. But sadly that didn't make it into the final cut. Perhaps next time we can do an extras feature with some of those scenes, or indeed a behind the scenes making of. So our time has come to an end now. I'm so sorry that we haven't got to more of your questions, but I hope you've enjoyed this live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott, talking a little bit about behind the scenes, the making of Ancient Invisible Cities, in advance of the final episode tonight, 9 p.m, BBC 2, where we go to Istanbul. And I'll be live tweeting that episode, so please do join in and send your questions about Istanbul, about the Istanbul programme to me. My Twitter handle is @ProfMCScott, or you can use the hashtag InvisibleCitiesBBC. And you will see us in Istanbul going through the markets, the Grand Bazaar, and you will see me doing the thing that I enjoy, I do every time I go to Istanbul, which is me having a cutthroat razor shave in Istanbul, done by a barber who had worked in that shop where we filmed with him for the last 36 years. He was a true expert, although I have to admit I got slightly nervous when he started setting light to pumice stones and bringing flames near my face. But tune in this evening to see that scene and find out more. So thank you very much indeed for joining, and we hope to see you again next week, Thursday the 27th of September, 4 p.m. UK time. More on the Facebook page, facebook.com/Michael Scott Academic. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to being with you and sharing in the joy of Ancient Invisible Cities this evening. Take care.